Hey there, YouTube. I'm going through some of my existing writings. I still have grunch.net as of today. This is a domain where I've warehoused and archived a lot of my writings. Today is July 20th, 2019. I scrolled through these thinking, sometime maybe the only record of these writings will be on YouTube, but then maybe that's not where they'll end up. But anyway, it's kind of a way of backing up to scroll through these and realize that with high resolution, I can get them in a video form. Anyway, what am I talking about in Project Renaissance? This is similar to Asylum City, which is my more recent casting of the idea in terms of NGOs and nonprofits collaborating with the high-tech R&D divisions of aerospace, computers, and so on. Kind of like if the UN got together with Google and helped kids get Netflix in refugee camps, or if we had Facebook for free for everybody in Gaza. I know that sounds crazy, right? There's not even internet much in Gaza. Like, we don't think in terms of private sector helping people. That's something that the government's supposed to do. But then if the government does that, that's called socialism, and that's a bad thing too. So really, people who have no means, like people who are just sleeping on the ground and have nothing, they are not supposed to get help from anywhere, really, because if the government does it, that's socialism. And if the private sector does it, well, they're betraying their shareholders because they're doing something anti-profitable. But are they? We need people to learn how to live in these new dwelling machines. We have this idea that we could create new cities, but how do we define the roles? What is it that we're going to create together, right? It's going to take people playing roles. And so Project Renaissance was about getting people who need roles, get them some roles. By roles, I mean like in a movie. Let's make a movie with casts of millions eventually. All of us are in kind of the movie of this world, and it takes energy to move. Movie, move, energy. We can't really not move if we're alive. But how do we create these not just as Hollywood mock-ups? Although mock-ups are often more impressive than their real-world counterparts, they fail an important relevance test when showcasing technologies we have no idea how to actually implement in real time, as in the Star Trek scenarios. In other words, I'm saying let's not just go with science fiction because the fiction component is too high. We need to go with more like science fact. Project Renaissance style, quote, science fiction, by contrast, is both, quote, near future and centered around existing, accessible, operational props and prototypes. Project Renaissance storyboards are critically dependent only on currently attained levels of comprehension of scientific principles. In other words, I'm not waiting for 0 point energy or UFOs to help us, or how do UFOs get their power? If they exist, I don't know, but I'm not basing Project Renaissance on Deus Ex Machina, right? It's based on technology we already have. Not every storyboard launched in the public domain for testing and feedback should or will be implemented, at least on the scale originally planned, but at least the degree of realism will remain high, so that the general public will not be overly confused as to their options, which confusion too often leads to voting taxpayers pinning lots of hope on scenarios that scientists and engineers simply cannot make real, hence wasting valuable time and investments and resulting in widespread cynicism and disillusionment with the political process. So here I would put, like, not all of AI, but the kind of AI that says, oh, we're going to be able to create thinking, human-like computers anytime, and what's more, maybe we'll be able to upload your consciousness into one of them, and you can live forever as a robot. You can get a lot of people to spend money for that, but at the expense of what? According to this Project Renaissance storyboard, we anticipate that the general public will not generally begrudge the tax-exempt status given the public service sector, nor the tax breaks afforded corporate R&D departments, given ample media unambiguously documenting the positive impact of Project Renaissance type programming. This is my call for screenwriters. This is my call for Hollywood. Now, we have nonprofits now. They make weapons, right? There's a lot of nonprofits in that ecosystem, and people are frustrated by that because they understand that just stockpiling weapons for murder and selling them and calling that government is a poor excuse for government. So I recommend this writing here. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I just wanted you to see that I have, since the 90s, been on the same wavelength pretty much. And I think this is partly why Applewhite wanted to work with me, because he said at one point, it just makes a lot of sense, right? I was trying to make sense, and I had a whole life ahead of me 20 years ago, so I thought maybe I would get to live in this world. And so I had a personal investment in getting it going, and I still do, right? But now, here's my viewing history on YouTube. It's cool that YouTube exists. Like, hey, there's a lot that's going on that's good, and that I'm able to sit here and create videos. That's something that I'm not denying that. This is another case where I let my own playlist play all night or something, so it looks like I only watch myself. But I'm actually sleeping through a lot of this. But then more recently, here I am watching Max Blumenthal, trying to stay in touch with what's going on. It does indeed, when I look over the shoulder of Max Blumenthal, it all seems pretty hopeless. And where I come down, as you know, is I'm like, we need help from the engineering community to at least give a little bit of bandwidth to something interesting in STEM, in mathematics, which is what I call the whole number volumes. This is a picture from the color plates that Fuller had produced. I actually had the Synergetics folio, which was all these color plates collected in a large format, carryable sort of folio, right? And when I was in Egypt, I left it on purpose at some art school now, I forget. But this was a long time ago. This was in the early 1980s when my parents lived in Egypt. Here's a picture of all the color plates. Pretty small right now. But like this one, this is important. Let's zoom in on this image. This is the whole number volumes. This is where I think Frank Zubek gets confused, because this two frequency tetrahedron has a volume of 8. It's when we get down to the octahedron inside, that has the volume of 4, and then we have the rhombic dodecahedron of volume 6. Think of how this could be made better just by animation, right? And think of how we're trying to teach fractions to little kids. We could employ polyhedron fragments more like this. It's ancient stuff, right? This looks a lot like the game people play with the, quote, Archimedean duels and so on. It's all very Western civilization. It's all very, like, easy to see how this could become part of the curriculum, but why doesn't it, right? Where is the bandwidth for this? I learned also at OSCON now that the way they see it is competition for your attention is greater than ever, but the quality of your attention is less than ever, because everyone's distracted. Even as we're sitting there at OSCON listening to these highly technical talks, people are scrolling through their computer and their phone and trying to do email at the same time. Everybody's multitasking, and so the quality of our attention is decreasing. Maybe it's gotten to the point where we're all just so distracted that something that requires as much thought as some change to the curriculum, that we would talk about the whole number volumes and so on, it's just too simple at one level. It's like we can't believe we didn't go for this when we could. There must be something wrong with it. Otherwise, other people would be teaching it. This would be in the textbooks if it were true, right? That's the vicious cycle that we're in. If this Fuller stuff could hold water, then it would already be public knowledge more than it is. And the fact that you've never heard about most of this stuff is just proof that at some level it must be just nutty, right? Doesn't matter that Hugh Kenner, a great humanities scholar, James Joyce scholar, and so forth, wrote this book, Geodesic Math and How to Use It. It doesn't matter if the whole Earth is our promised land and that it has this cool map called the Fuller projection that we could be sharing in schools, not to the exclusion of other maps, but it is part of our American heritage. It's like if any of this were worth something, we'd already know it by now. I think that's kind of the pitfall people fall into. And therefore, good-hearted journalists who are working really hard to make the world a better place don't take advantage of the leverage offered by this kind of, I'll call it retro-futurism, but retro in the sense that we could go back to this branch and go forward from there. There's nothing about it that's less relevant today. It's something that a lot of people still in their private bubbles think, gosh, I really wish we could do that. Like this Dymaxion house, the money orders were coming in. People were sending in checks. I'm ready to live in one of these, right? It was that close. But, now we're just looking at lots and lots of refugee camps and hellholes, and people are being imprisoned for their entire lives in terrible ghetto circumstances, and our idea of a better world has been put on hold, I think, while we wait for teachers, not politicians, but teachers, to pick up on the curriculum that we're deliberately avoiding at the moment. The curriculum that's sitting right there, 2 or 3 mouse clicks away at all times. It's not something you should have to work very hard to incorporate, because I've shown pretty easily where it could go, how it could fit, what the connections are. It's all there. So it's frustrating to me that I kind of have to, almost beg that people would pay attention to something so clearly relevant as the whole number volumes table. I'm not claiming that this is solving particle physics issues or we're going to understand, the deep mysteries of the universe if only we look at this. I don't know where it's going to go, but I do know that it's accessible, and where it does go already in STEM topics, into crystallography, virology, and so forth, that's enough rationale already. And then when you add in where it takes us in terms of better options for housing and shelter, then I'm saying it pays for itself many times over to just go into it where it is now without wondering, what does this mean for particle physics 1,000 years from now? I have no idea. I don't have the big answers. I don't know about dark matter and dark energy and where they all fit in. But if we make that the criterion, like, we'll start reading synergetics when we figure out how it solves all our problems in particle physics or quantum physics, that's the litmus test for its relevance. I think that's crazy. I don't think that's where we should go. And that's partly why I insist that synergetics be seen for what it is, which is a very interesting philosophy, a great contribution to the humanities, which has significance in STEM. We're always looking for ways to bridge the two cultures, science and the humanities. Here's the way, here's a way. Why not take advantage? And if you're a journalist concerned about social justice and making the world a better place, don't ignore futurism. Instead of just how to punish the behaviors you don't like, where's the carrot, not just stick, right? Where's the way out that's positive? And I think just saying words like democracy is not enough. You've got to actually point to artifacts. You got to point to lifestyles. And that takes more imagination than just ideological terminology. Like political terminology does not carry enough there's not enough imagination in that. People hear a word like socialism and they immediately flash on, various propaganda images or, there's no substance to it unless you can create a whole science fiction world around it. And that's what Fuller was really good at doing, and what all of us could be good at doing. We just need to give our imaginations permission to go in this direction and to dream about the future in a positive way. Then we'll find our horrible present, our nightmare scenarios will tend to dissolve because people have hope again. If you've got people feeling there's no way out and it's you or me, it should be me in that case, then we're back to a vicious, cruel world without much hope. So, whole number volumes. If you're a journalist, think about figuring a path to this material. I don't have all the answers. Talk to you soon.